She was described as the love of his life, an elemental force that could be felt in the wind. But tragically, these are the words spoken by her very own killer. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime. Today we're heading down to South Africa to look at the case of Jayde Panayiotou, who was found dead in the year of 2015. This is a very sad story about a married woman who wasn't even aware of the love triangle that she was locked into. But just before today's case, I wanted to let you know that I post both solved and unsolved cases here on a weekly basis, so if true crime is your kind of thing, then please consider subscribing to Coffeehouse Crime. So pull up a seat, grab a coffee and sit back. This is the case of Jayde Panayiotou. Today's case takes us south of the equator to South Africa. More specifically, the city formerly known as Port Elizabeth. I say formerly because earlier this year in February 2021, Port Elizabeth was renamed to Gqeberha, the Xhosa name for Bakkens River. Officials changed the city's name along with other cities in South Africa to bring back dignity to the black communities living in cities with former colonial names. But with all events to this case happening prior to 2021, and for my ability to pronounce things right, I'll be using the city's former name, Port Elizabeth. Apart from a wide range of coastal attractions that bring both domestic and international travellers to Port Elizabeth, the city also offers a huge selection of eateries, shopping venues, and bars. It's also the only city in South Africa to boast the Big Seven within its boundaries. That means you can find all of South Africa's largest animals here. The whale, shark, leopard, lion, buffalo, rhino, and of course, elephant. The city of Port Elizabeth sports a population of 1.2 million, up 200,000 since the year of 2004. And in the year of 2004, one of those living in Port Elizabeth was Chris Panayiotou, an 18-year-old man. He had just about finished his education at school and was looking to kickstart some efforts into his father's small business empire. His father owned several stores around Port Elizabeth, including Bambi Snack Bar, located on Market Street. Chris himself was described as a hard and dedicated worker, with a keen business sense. It was during the year of 2004, while at a friend's gathering, that a pretty face caught his eye. He met Jayde, who was also 18 at the time. The two started talking, and almost immediately they hit it off. The two began dating and soon after fell in love. Jayde was described as a fun-loving, sweet-natured young woman. She had a lot of love to give, a trait that would inspire her to one day become a teacher. And the next year in 2005, she enrolled into university to take up a degree in teaching. Throughout the next few years, Jayde and Chris's relationship would grow, as did Jayde's academic knowledge and Chris's business. During her time at university, Chris opened both his first and his second business. He opened a local grocery store in Algoa Park, commissioning it to be part of the OK Grocery franchise. And his second business, pretty much right next door, was a restaurant and cocktail bar that he creatively named Infinity. Fast forward to the year 2011 and things were looking more serious for the young professional couple. Not only had Jayde graduated from university, but now she also had a job lined up at a local elementary school. And even bigger news, but Chris had finally proposed to Jayde, the two now officially engaged. Saying that, they moved in together. But things didn't stay sweet for long, because unknown to Jayde, Chris was actually having an affair. Back at his grocery store, about 2 years prior, Chris had hired a younger woman who went by the name of Chanel Coots. And while at first things were strictly business between the two, by the year of 2012 that had changed. The two started a secret love affair, and while they'd keep it secret, there were subtle signs of affection that colleagues would suspiciously pick up while at work. In secrecy, the two would spend nights together at local hotels, and eventually, during the nights that Jayde was away, Chanel would even stay at his place. It's not known exactly how we found out, but a few months into the affair, Chris's father, Costa Panayiotou, became aware of the situation. Costa was enraged to find out the news. By now, he had known Jayde for over 8 years, and he loved her very much as a future daughter-in-law. She was loyal, hardworking, and kind, and he saw the enormous potential in her. It was on this basis that Costa threatened his own son, that he would disinherit him if he carried on with the affair, or if he left Jayde for Chanel. Costa was a successful businessman within Port Elizabeth, and to Chris, this was his lifeline, because one day Chris would be sure to inherit all of his father's hard work. So after their messy argument had ended, Chris reassured his father Costa that he was no longer seeing Chanel. But this was actually untrue, and in further secrecy, the two continued on to have their affair. All in the meantime, Jayde had no idea what was going on. Fast forward to the year 2013, and it was finally time. In June, Chris and Jayde officially tied the knot, the two formally becoming Mr. and Mrs. Panayiotou. From the outside, Chris and Jayde were a couple that many envied, a strong businessman and a loving teacher. It was, however, during this period that circumstances outside of their marriage were changing. It was good news for Jayde. She was hired as a teacher to work at Rebec College in the nearby area of Oitanage. But for Chris, his situation was going the other way. Strong local competition as well as lesser appetite than expected meant that profits at his grocery store and his cocktail bar were not looking so healthy. In fact, financial figures were even in the red for some months. The shaky financials would cause Chris further grief, as technically he was looking after two women at the same time. He'd treat Jayde to a few luxuries, but the majority of his gift money was going to his mistress on the side, Chanel. This included a Ralph Lauren handbag, an expensive watch, GHD straighteners, a large contribution to a new car, and a reptile. And don't forget about those nights at hotels either. Chris was even buying gifts for Chanel's best friend Cap in order to keep her sweet and therefore remain quiet about the affair. All of these details were greatly contributing towards Chris's crumbling bank account. Nevertheless, he wanted to make things work, and so he added even more hours to his already busy work schedule. But as the years ticked by from 2013 to 2015, Chris became less and less available to his own wife. He was still putting all the effort in to try and get his business back off the ground. And his extra reason to be at the grocery store was still there too. Jayde felt this, and very quickly she became a lonely woman. Confiding in her friends, she felt Chris had no time for her. He was always out of the house, and emotionally, he was absent when home. She would normally manage to force Chris to come home for dinner before he headed back out to work, and even made excuses to drop by and say hello to him in the evenings. But it wasn't enough, and by September 2014, she seemed to be at breaking point. On September the 21st, she wrote a letter to herself that described her feelings. Condensed, she wrote, "All I ever wanted is to be loved, fully and completely. I know that love is not what it seems to be in the movies, but I don't feel the love I dream about. I am jealous when I see people living the life I so desperately long for. I want a normal life, a husband that comes home at a normal time, has a normal job, and makes time for his wife and family. Somebody that doesn't hide, lie, or cover up, always respects and puts his wife first. I don't know if I can live like this. I don't know how much more I can take. Why can't I have the normal happy life? Why am I not the apple in my husband's eye? Why does he hide so much from me, and why is it impossible to communicate with him? I feel as though I do not have a heart. It is torn and shredded and full of holes." The letter is enough to describe how Jayde really felt about her own marriage. She loved Chris a lot, and all she wanted to do was spend time with him. And this was no secret either, because everyone around Jayde and Chris knew that she was lonely. In fact, when Chris asked Jayde's best friend what she wanted for her birthday, she replied with, "She just wants to spend time with you, Chris." Chris did understand the trouble, but he was too busy trying to keep his businesses afloat. He also had other things on his mind, more specifically, another woman. And then, in the early morning of the 21st of April 2015, Jayde Panayiotou disappeared. The 21st of April 2015 was a Tuesday, a usual day for Jayde to work. She was expected into her job at Rebec College that day, located about 40 minutes by car from her home in Stellan Glen, just west of Port Elizabeth. Jayde would usually car share with her colleague and best friend Shri Swanepoel into work, and the plan today was exactly like it had been hundreds of times before. Jayde would walk outside her home at 6:15 in the morning and wait outside her gated community for Charisse to pick her up. But when Charisse arrived, Jayde was nowhere to be found. Calls to her mobile phone went unanswered, and a doorbell to her house led to a dead end too. And when the property was eventually checked with no luck, serious concerns started to slowly boil over. It was in this moment that Charisse finally called the police. By 10 AM, a missing persons alert was posted on social media, and soon the news of her disappearance started to spread too. Police would launch a massive search that very same day, including the use of the flying squad and several canine units, but as the sun set, they were still none the wiser on her whereabouts. Jayde's family would offer 50,000 rands as a reward to any information that could lead to her safe return, and by nightfall that reward had tripled to 150,000 rand. Many people took to social media to help try and find Jayde. The hashtag #FindJayde started to trend, and throughout the night that would be used extensively. But just as search efforts began to pick up for the first full day of searching at around 10 AM, tragic news came in. An officer reported to his team that, with the assistance of his canine unit, he had found a body. It was located in a bushy area close to a gravel road just outside of Kwanabushle. And sadly, forensics would quickly confirm that the body did belong to that of Jayde Panayiotou. She was fully clothed and had been shot 3 times, 2 to the back and 1 to the head. Her bank cards, along with her jewellery, were all missing. Family members who had rushed to the scene were devastated to hear the news. Friends and family were in tears, Jayde's sister almost collapsing, and Chris was there too. When the news of her death broke out to her school, both students and colleagues mourned the loss of their kind, nurturing teacher. Heartache extended far and wide throughout South Africa, and with the case's coverage over Twitter and Facebook, pain was felt at an international level too. But one of the greatest and most concerning questions about her death was still to be answered. Why did Jayde have to die? Considering the nature around her death, it didn't make much sense. While it was learned that her possessions were taken off of her body, murder is quite an extreme precaution to take for this kind of crime. And the very next day, on the 23rd of April, police released 2 surveillance images of a person of interest. It was quickly learned that on the day of Jayde's death, her credit cards had been used on 2 separate occasions, and the ATM cameras picked up these 2 images. But no one close to Jayde knew who they were. Exactly 1 week after her death, family and friends of Jayde laid her to rest at Mater Dei Catholic Church in Newton Park. Her students were part of the hundreds of people who came to express their sorrows and their goodbyes. All of her loved ones were in attendance, and the funeral's emotions peaked around Chris's moving and poetic tribute to his deceased wife. But this is where things start to look a little shaky for Chris. The tribute that he had made for his wife Jayde was good, really good. In fact, it was so well made that it was a little strange that he managed to polish off something so well during his time of despair. And that's because the script wasn't actually his. In fact, at the time, if you went on to Google and typed in wife eulogy, it would come up with another tribute by Charles Atkins to his own deceased wife. And the similarities are painfully lazy. While this was a very lousy thing for Chris to do, it didn't necessarily mean that he was guilty of anything. He could have just simply been too upset to make his own script, saying that it did raise eyebrows around him and his own authenticity to his own wife. But little did he know that there were other things going on in the background, and hour by hour, the noose around Chris's neck was tightening. One day before the funeral, police actually arrested a man in connection to Jayde's murder based off a tip from an undisclosed source. The man arrested went by the name of Lutundo Sioni, who just happened to be the bouncer to Chris's own nightclub. Allegations had started circulating that Lutundo may have helped orchestrate the crime, and while in custody, Lutundo must have got cold feet. He crumbled, confessing everything to police. He claimed that Chris had asked him to hire a hit on his own wife, and while Lutundo wouldn't do it himself, he did know a friend or two. The tip led to a massive breakthrough in the case, but they still had no evidence linking Chris to the murder. They needed something more to prove that Chris wanted his own wife dead. This is a very heavy accusation, and so they hatched up a plan. They decided to release Lutundo from custody under one special condition. He would now have to carry out an undercover mission and secretly record Chris and get him to admit that he was involved in his wife's own murder. In response, they would reduce his sentence, and so on that note, Latundo agreed. He called Chris the next day, and it worked.
I've been living like a rat now.
Why?
I don't know. Like Babala called me and then he told me like police were there at my house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everything now is changing now.
But why are the police after you?
That's why I don't know. I think there's an informer somewhere somehow. You know.
Where are they going to?
I don't know. They didn't tell me. Because I even changed my SIM card.
Yeah, but you need to change it again now.
Yeah. After
you need to stop phoning me.
Yeah. After this, we're gonna stop. Like you.
Don't phone me or SMS me.
So what's going on was?
I don't know, bro.
This thing. I didn't see that it's gonna be like this.
Yeah.
How much is this?
Plus minus 5.
How much is it?
5. What did they ask you?
Fucking questions.
Hey?
Fucking questions.
Tell me.
Nothing serious, boys.
Did they ask you if you were involved?
Yeah, sort of something like that.
So what did you say?
Yeah, no, I lost their way though. Those were stupid ones.
So where did they take you to? Did you take your phone anywhere?
That
No,
phone,
the other phone.
Yeah, I destroyed.
Did you?
Yeah, he told me to destroy it. Then I destroyed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the SIM card and everything.
Everything. I'm not using.
Did you throw it away?
Yes. I'm not using Vodafone now. You see.
Okay.
I'm using this phone.
So they didn't ask you anything about me?
No.
Or if I'm involved with anything?
Yeah, but I haven't. They asked you.
Eh?
Haven't they asked you yet?
Yes, they asked me, but now you've been phoning me all day and they're tracing my phone, don't they?
So
I have to tell them you phoned me. Otherwise they're going to think I'm involved.
yeah.
So you need to destroy that phone now. The phone and the SIM card, my boy. Both.
That of the police that are coming to me.
And I swear my life I didn't say anything, but they're obviously seeing who I've been phoning. They are tracking my phone and every number I phoned. They've investigated my family too.
Well, what is it you did?
Somebody said something.
Because this is like a murder thing now. It's not like a robbery or something.
But that's what I said to you. It became a kidnapping and then a murder instead of just making it a robbery outside the house.
Yeah, John, shit. Yeah.
You need to go hide in Jeffrey's for a while
Yeah.
and keep quiet. So I'm going to say you must destroy your phone now, ne?
Yeah.
And the SIM card, and I'm going to say you told me you're going to East London. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to be okay as long as they never know about us, Tando.
Yeah.
There's about 5 there. Sort yourself out. Because I'm all out now. This thing's cost me a lot of money. The family's also looking at me.
Serious?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
This thing is not like, it's not a little thing.
No, because these boys made it big. I told you to let them do it outside the house and take the bags and the rings, and then they didn't take the watch or anything.
They just left everything.
They just left everything there. You see, so it looks like a hit now. So they are after me, and that's why I can't meet you just like this in front of people, Tando. Okay. Cheers.
Police arrested Chris 2 hours later that night. Events around Jayde's case would continue to unfold, and eventually highlighted 3 more suspects to the case: Sizwazake Vamazonke, Sinatemba Nanembe, and Solane Sebeko. And while Chris denied any involvement to his wife's death, the alleged story was that he had asked his bodyguard to organise a hit, who then hired 3 hitmen to do the work. Chris gave the instruction to do it early in the morning at 6:30, while Jayde would be waiting for a colleague to pick her up for work. He requested that they stage the murder as if it were a robbery, by contracting the kill right outside the gates of Stellan Glen, and stealing all of her possessions from her body. The date for Jayde's contract was originally set to be 1 day earlier, on the 20th of April 2015. But while Chris's hitmen were mustering up their courage for the job, Jayde's friend Charisse actually appeared, and so they decided that they'd do it another day. Apparently this delay enraged Chris a lot. He wanted his wife dead as soon as possible, and so he demanded that it happened the next day. On the 21st of April 2015, Jayde appeared outside her community gates shortly after 6:15 AM, and unknown to her at the time, the 3 hitmen were there too. They were in a hired vehicle just several meters down the road. The trio decided to change their plans along the way, however. They didn't want any witnesses of the murder. So instead of killing her on the spot, they would kidnap her, take her somewhere private, and then complete their contract. Jayde found herself in the back of a hired vehicle, where she was then driven 20 miles northwest to a location outside Quanabouchelet. The drive would take about 30 minutes to get there. She was then dragged out of the car and shot 3 times, dying instantly upon the 3rd bullet. The killers then drove to a nearby ATM and withdrew 1,500 rand, the equivalent of $100. A second attempt was made again later that day, but due to a PIN being incorrectly entered, payment was withheld, both attempts capturing one of her killers on camera. The magistrate's court would trial all 4 men together, excluding Chris's bouncer, with thanks to his plea bargain. But mysteriously, before the trial would even begin, one of Chris's hitmen would suddenly die, leaving the remaining 2, along with Chris, to face the judge. Strangely, Sizozake Vamazonke, who had died while on leave from prison to be in hospital, had previously made claims that he was being assaulted by police officers in prison. But police denied such allegations, and later he died after slipping into a coma. His death would stop nothing, however, because on the 11th of October 2015, the trial against Chris and his 2 hitmen would begin. Prosecutors argued that the motive for the murder was that Chris could not keep up with paying for both his wife and his mistress, and so his wife had to go. Meanwhile, Chris's defense would argue that he had a heart of gold, and he would never do such a thing. In fact, he had apparently just bought Jayde and himself a new home, so why would he kill her? The motive was supposedly just not there. Chris's mistress Chantal Coutts would also take the stand at trial, and spoke about the expensive gifts that Chris had given her. She also confirmed that she had slept over at Chris's townhouse when Jayde was away, and of their cheeky nights together at local hotels. But the secret recording of Chris took the spotlight for incriminating evidence, and if that wasn't enough, it was discovered that phone calls between Chris's bouncer and his hitmen were made seconds before GPS coordinates of the hitmen's phones landed outside Jayde's property. ATM mugshots were also picked up, as were the GPS coordinates of the hired vehicle, which matched the path that would have been taken between Jayde's home and the location of Jayde's body. Following this, along with a myriad of other details, on the 2nd of November 2017, which was also Chris's 31st birthday, Chris Panayiotou was found guilty of the murder of his wife, Jayde Panayiotou. It was also learned that Chris was in the process of acquiring a 2.2 million rand loan, which would mean that it would be impossible to keep both his wife and his mistress happy. The judge also concluded that Chris regretted marrying Jayde, and he killed his wife to cut down on his ever-increasing debt. As a result of his heartless and brutal actions, the judge showed Chris no mercy, and sentenced the man to life in prison. Sinatemba Nanembe also received life in prison for Jayde's murder, and Solani Sebeko also received 15 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder. Chris's bouncer Lutando Sioni still awaits his full sentencing. And regardless of how long each involved man now faces, it could never be as bad as Jayde's demise, who must have been terrified in her final moments, before eventually being killed behind the motives of abandonment, betrayal, and greed. Jayde was all around a good person. She was described to have a heart of gold, and her dedication to her causes and people were humbling and sincere. She was feisty, enthusiastic, and loyal. Described by one of her students as a limited edition, she had a positive attitude, a bright personality, and a beautiful smile to match. She deserved so much more in life. And in the end, it was her very own husband that sold her entire life for a bounty of 80,000 rand, the equivalent of about $5,500. 2 years later, on December 9th, 2019, Chris's father Costa Panayiotou, who was against Chris's affair, was tragically gunned down and killed outside of his own shop. Costa was shot multiple times while closing up his shop for the night, and then his car stolen. And while his murder doesn't seem linked to the case of Chris and Jayde whatsoever, it's another awful and unnecessary death to this story. This was another really tragic case to cover, one that has left 2 families entirely destroyed, all down to the actions of a selfish man who put his own pride and money above his wife's life. I hope Chris Panayiotou spends the rest of his life behind bars, full of regret and sorrow. Thank you again for watching another case today by Coffeehouse Crime. If you found this video interesting, or if you learned something new, then liking the video and subscribing does help me out. This was a pretty tough and twisted case to cover, one that I'm sure will generate a lot of opinions, so please do me a favour and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more cases from South Africa, then please let me know too. Thank you again for watching, and you know it by now, I'll be right here behind this camera waiting for you in the next one. Until that moment arrives though, look after each other. Goodbye.